When did things change between me and my children? It's such a simple question, quiet, almost whispered, and yet behind those words lies an ocean of heartbreak, confusion, and longing. You never thought you'd have to ask it. There was a time not too long ago when you were their entire world. You were the arms they ran to when their knees were scraped, the one who stayed up all night when they had a fever, whispering prayers and hoping they'd sleep peacefully, the one who clapped the loudest at every recital, every little triumph, even the ones that didn't matter to anyone else. You traded your dreams for their stability. You put vacations on hold, pushed aside your hobbies. Sometimes you skipped meals just to make sure there was enough on the table for them. You never complained, not out loud anyway. Because for you, love always meant sacrifice. And you'd do it again. But now something feels different. You can't quite name when it began, but somewhere along the way, the warmth started to fade. The conversations grew shorter, the phone calls less frequent, the eye contact became fleeting, distracted almost as if you were in the way. They interrupt you now, as if your thoughts are no longer valid. They brush off your advice as old-fashioned, irrelevant. They make plans and leave you out of them, not maliciously, but with that painful kind of indifference that cuts sharper than anger ever could. And when you ask for help, maybe to move a box, set up a new phone, or just to sit and talk, you suddenly realize they're too busy. Every time, too busy working, too busy parenting, too busy being grown-ups. But you were once their whole world. What changed? You begin to question yourself. Was I too strict, too soft? Did I do something wrong? You replay old conversations, wondering if maybe you missed a moment, the moment when the tide turned. Maybe it was that time you said no to something they wanted. Or maybe it was when you didn't say enough. But the truth is, this shift, this slow distancing, happens to so many parents. It's not always about one dramatic event. Sometimes it's just life. The passing of time, the fading of role. You went from being needed every second to slowly being seen as someone who doesn't quite fit into their new routines. And now you feel it in the silence. The silence when they walk past you and check their phones instead of saying hello. The silence after you share a story and they don't even respond. The silence in your heart when you're sitting alone in the house that used to echo with laughter, chaos, and love. You don't expect them to be children again. You raise them to be independent, to have their own lives, and they did. You're proud of that. But you also hoped that independence wouldn't come with distance. You hoped that as they grew into their own selves, they'd still carry you with them in their hearts, in their thoughts, in their time. Instead, you find yourself asking the unthinkable. Have I become invisible? That's the word that stings the most, invisible. Not unloved, because you know deep down they love you, but unseen, as if who you are, what you feel, what you still offer, no longer matters, and it hurts. It hurts in a way that's hard to explain to others. Because what do you even say? Hey, I feel forgotten. Hey, I miss being important to you. Those words feel too heavy, too vulnerable, too likely to be misunderstood. So instead you smile, you nod, you say I'm fine when they ask, if they ask. You offer help even when you're tired. You laugh at their jokes, even when they cut you a little. You keep showing up for them in every way, hoping maybe this time they'll see you again. But here's something no one tells you about aging. It's not just the body that changes, it's the roles, the identity, the relationships. There comes a moment in every parent's life when the world shifts, when you're no longer the guide but the bystander, when your voice gets a little quieter in their world, and while you understand it intellect, yet still through all the ache, through all the questions, there's this unwavering truth. You are not alone. There are thousands, millions of parents who feel exactly like you do, questioning, hurting, loving, and wondering what happened to the bond they once shared so deeply with their children. And this message, this moment, is not about blaming them. It's not about pointing fingers or nursing wounds. It's about acknowledging your truth with grace, with courage, and most importantly, with dignity. Because you matter. You mattered then, and you still matter now. And while the world may not shout it, and while your children may not always show it, your presence carries wisdom. Your story has value. Your love has never stopped being the quiet backbone of the family. So if you're sitting there heart heavy, wondering where the connection went, know this: You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. And this next chapter of your life isn't about disappearing. It's about reclaiming, rebuilding, rediscovering not only the love you gave, but the love you are worthy of right now. Just as you are. This is only the beginning. The core message: don't demand respect. Live in a way that it naturally appears. There comes a time in life, maybe in your 60s, maybe in your 70s, when the roles begin to shift. When the parent who once led the family through every storm suddenly becomes the one waiting quietly in the background. When the voice that used to command attention is now often spoken over, or even worse, ignored. And in that silence, many parents begin to feel the weight of something they never expected. Disrespect. It doesn't always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it's a tone. Sometimes it's a rolled up. Sometimes it's the way they say, "We've got it," that carries more dismissal than reassurance. Other times it's forgetting to call, canceling last minute, or brushing off your opinion as outdated or unnecessary. And when that happens, when your own children stop listening, stop looking, stop appreciating, you may feel something break inside. Something small at first, but deep. You gave your life to this family. You put everyone else first. You thought at the very least that would earn their respect. So you try to bring it back. You remind them of everything you've done. You say, "I was there for you every day." Or, "I gave up so much so you could have more." You get upset. You raise your voice. Maybe you even go quiet for a while, hoping your absence will make them realize your worth. But nothing really changes. Not for long. And that's where the truth begins to unfold. Respect can't be demanded. It can't be shouted into existence. It can't be guilted into returning. It has to be inspired. And inspiration doesn't come from loud voices or emotional ultimatums. It comes from something far more powerful. A quiet, unwavering sense of self-respect. You see, your children may not be listening to your words, but they are watching your life. They're watching how you carry yourself, how you respond when you're hurt, how you set limits when lines are crossed, and how you speak up when something doesn't feel right. They're watching whether you shrink or whether you stand. And here's what changes everything. When you stop trying to prove your worth and simply start living like someone who knows it, you don't need to remind them of the sacrifices. You live them. You don't need to beg for time or attention. You deserve it. You don't need to argue to be heard. You've already earned your place. The moment you stop chasing their approval and start anchoring yourself in your own dignity is the moment things begin to shift. Because respect doesn't grow in the soil of resentment or obligation or guilt. It grows in the presence of authenticity, strength, and clarity. Think about the people you respect most. Chances are they don't demand it. They live it. They move through the world with calm confidence. They don't react to everything. They don't over-explain. They don't need everyone to agree with them. They're just steady, solid, certain in who they are. You can be that, and you don't have to wait for anyone's permission. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment, or the right words, or for your children to finally say what you've been longing to hear. You can decide today, right now, that your time matters, your presence matters, your feelings matter. You can decide that being overlooked is not a price you're willing to pay for peace anymore. That doesn't mean slamming doors. It doesn't mean turning your back. It means showing up fully, as yourself, and letting your children meet you there or not. It means saying gently but firmly, "Please don't speak to me that way," or "I'm not available that day," or simply no. It means honoring your own voice, even if it trembles the first few times you use it. And yes, at first, they may push back. They may not like the change. People rarely do when you stop playing the role they've grown comfortable with. They may say you're being difficult, or sensitive, or selfish, but they'll also start to notice something else. They'll notice you walking taller, smiling more, saying less, but meaning more. They'll notice that you're no longer chasing them, that your world doesn't revolve around their schedules, their moods, their validation. And that noticing is powerful, because it disrupts the pattern. It invites them to pause, to reflect, to re-see you not as the always available, always agreeing, ever sacrificing parent, but as a whole, vibrant, grounded person. That's when respect returns, not because you demanded it, but because you created an atmosphere where it's the only appropriate response. It's hard to do, I know, especially when you love deeply. when you're wired to give, when silence from your children feels like punishment. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's fear, and fear never invites respect. So what does this look like in practice? It looks like making plans and keeping them even if your child suddenly asks for your time at the last minute. It looks like not tolerating sarcasm, rudeness, or dismissiveness, even if they didn't mean it that way. It looks like building a life where you are emotionally full, not waiting for a text, a visit, or a compliment to feel seen. It looks like being okay with discomfort, knowing it's the path to long-term health in the relationship. And above all, it looks like choosing peace over performance. You don't have to perform to be loved. You don't have to bend to be worthy. You don't have to fight to be respected. You just have to be who you are, fully, honestly, proudly, and let your children rise to meet you in that space. If they don't, that's hard. It's heartbreaking, but it's not the end of the story, because your story is still unfolding. You are not just a parent, you are a person, and your self-respect is not something to be given away, even for those you love most. So take a breath. Remember who you are. Remember everything you've overcome. Remember the decades of devotion, the long nights, the hard choices, the quiet strength. Let all of that become the foundation you stand on now. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to prove your path. You just have to carry yourself like someone who already knows what they're worth. And when you do, your presence becomes undeniable. It speaks louder than any argument ever could. It teaches without saying a word. It changes the dynamic, not by force, but by example. Because when you live with self-respect, the world, yes, even your grown children, begins to reflect that back to you. Not always right away, not always perfectly, but slowly, surely, they'll begin to feel the shift. And maybe one day they'll look at you with fresh eyes. They'll see the quiet strength, the calm dignity, the unwavering clarity, and they'll remember who you are. They'll remember why you mattered. They'll remember the power of your presence. And in that moment, not out of guilt, not out of duty, but out of genuine admiration, they will begin to offer the one thing you stopped chasing: respect. Because now they'll know what you've known all along. You never needed to demand it. You were worthy of it all along. Margaret had always been the quiet strength of her family, the one who knew how to hold everything together without ever asking for recognition. For 30 years she worked as a nurse, coming home after long shifts to cook dinner, help with homework, sew torn uniforms, and stay up late waiting for her children to return home safely. She was never the loudest in the room, never the one to draw attention, but everyone leaned on her just the same. And when her husband passed away in his late 60s, she didn't fall apart. She grieved in private, got up the next day, and kept going for her children, not for herself. Her children loved her. Of that she was sure. But love, she would come to learn, doesn't always mean respect, especially when it's taken for granted. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. Her oldest daughter offered to help with the bills and suggested putting everything online for convenience. Margaret said yes. Then her son, ever the planner, proposed handling her insurance, saying it was too complicated for her to worry about. Again she nodded. When her youngest daughter asked her to move closer, said it would be easier if she lived just a few minutes away, so they could check on her more easily. Margaret agreed, even though it meant leaving behind the home she and her husband had built, the rose bushes he'd planted, the kitchen table that held decades of birthdays, tears, and laughter. She told herself it was the right thing, that it would bring them closer. But it did. Once she moved into the small condo her daughter had picked out, bright, clean, a little too quiet, she noticed the visits didn't come as often as promised. The phone calls became shorter, more rushed. Her input, even on things that affected her directly, was seldom asked for. Her prescriptions were filled without consultation, her groceries delivered without asking what she actually liked. When she once mentioned wanting to attend a church retreat in another town, her daughter frowned and said, "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. You're not really up for travel anymore." That night, Margaret sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her suitcase. It was still in the closet, untouched since the move. It wasn't cruelty. She kept telling herself, her kids were busy. She understood. They had their own families now. their own worries. But the truth she could no longer ignore was this. Somewhere along the way, they had stopped seeing her as someone capable. They loved her, yes, but they didn't respect her voice, her autonomy or her wisdom, not because they were unkind, but because she had taught them, through her endless silence, through her quiet compliance, that she would always step aside. And one night, it hit her. She had made herself too small. The moment that shifted everything came unexpected. They were having dinner. Her children, and her teenage grandson. The boy turned to her, eyes wide with excitement, and said, "Grandma, I'm thinking about joining the Marines. What do you think?" She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could say a word, her son cut in with a chuckle. "Oh, you know, Mom, she'll just say to stay safe and avoid trouble." The table burst into light laughter. Margaret smiled too, but something in her chest tightened. She wasn't angry. She wasn't offended. She was simply sad, because in that moment, she realized they had already written her lines for her. They had stopped expecting real thoughts, real opinions, real substance from her, and she had let them. That night she didn't cry. She sat in her chair with a cup of tea. The lights dimmed, and for the first time in years, she thought about what she wanted, not for them but for herself. The next morning, she called her bank and removed her daughter's access. She contacted her doctor and asked for full printed records. She signed up for a community watercolor class and drove herself to the library to renew her card. A few days later, she booked a train ticket to visit Alice, an old friend from nursing school she hadn't seen in decades. And when her daughter found out, the first question was, "Why didn't you tell me?" Margaret, steady and calm, replied, "Because I needed to remember that I still know how to make my own decisions. And I think I forgot that for a while." There was silence on the other end of the line. Not defensive, not angry, just quiet recognition. Things didn't change overnight, but they did begin to change. Her children started to ask before making choices that affected her. They listened more closely. They began inviting her opinion into the room, not just out of courtesy, but with curiosity, because Margaret wasn't just being nice anymore. She was being honest, and she was being herself. She hadn't yelled, she hadn't argued, she hadn't demanded anything. She simply stopped giving away her dignity in the name of peace. And what came back to her, slowly but surely, was respect. Not because she insisted on it, but because she finally lived like someone who deserved it. Healing and practical life principles that restore respect. There comes a time in every parent's journey, usually quiet, often unexpected, when you begin to realize that the same things that once made your family strong can, without boundaries, slowly start to make you feel unseen. You've given love, endless time, unwavering care. You've said yes more times than you should have, stayed silent when your heart ached, smiled through the weight of disappointment, just to keep the peace. But the truth is, love without balance doesn't build respect, it erodes it. So, if you're reading this with a heart that has quietly carried too much, here are some gentle but powerful truths, principles you can live by starting today, not out of anger, but out of healing. First, stop trying to please your children at any cost. It sounds simple, but for many parents it's one of the hardest things to accept, because pleasing them was how you showed love. It's how you protected them. But here's the thing. When you say yes while your heart says no, when you stretch yourself thin just to avoid upsetting them, you don't teach them to appreciate you. You teach them to expect more. And little by little, your own needs, your time, your energy, they start to disappear from the equation. You become the yes machine, the background comfort, the person who always adjusts, until one day, you look in the mirror and wonder where you went. Respect begins where self-respect is protected. That means if something doesn't feel right, it's okay to say no, not with guilt, not with a long explanation, just a gentle, clear no, because your worth isn't measured by how often you sacrifice yourself. It's measured by how honestly you live and how bravely you protect your peace. Second,
Don't argue to reclaim your position in the family. You don't need to remind your children of everything you've done. You don't need to shout louder to be heard. The truth is, every time you get pulled into shouting matches or defensive conversations, it sends the wrong message. It tells them you're still trying to earn what should have never been lost. But when you stop reacting, when you stay calm, when you speak clearly, quietly and with confidence, something shifts. You become the anchor again, not by force, but by presence, not because you won the argument, but because you refuse to lower yourself into chaos. That kind of strength is undeniable. It commands attention, even when no one says a word. Third, and this is a big one, don't let your emotional well-being depend on your children. You love them, of course you do, but they are not the keepers of your joy. They are not responsible for your peace. Waiting for them to call, to visit, to say thank you, to finally see all you've done. That's a heavy way to live, and it's not fair to you. Your soul deserves more than to be fed by scraps of attention. Build a life outside of their orbit. Find things that light you up. Take a class. Go for walks. Read something that makes you think. Find a friend to laugh with. When your happiness comes from within, not from how they treat you, you begin to shine in a whole new way. And that light, that independence, is magnetic. Your children will notice. They always do. Next, set boundaries that are loving but firm. This is not about punishing them or creating distance. It's about teaching them how to treat you. If they speak to you with sarcasm or condescension, it's okay to say, that tone doesn't feel good to me. If they show up late, take over decisions, or act like your time doesn't matter, you can say, I'd like to be part of that conversation, or my schedule matters too. At first, they may resist. They're not used to it. But over time, clear boundaries lead to deeper respect. You stop being the fallback, the automatic yes, and you become the person they think twice before interrupting, before dismissing, before forgetting, because now you're showing them how to treat you. And finally, don't keep giving when it's no longer seen or appreciated. Giving is beautiful. It's one of the most natural expressions of love. But giving without acknowledgement, giving out of habit, giving until you feel depleted, that doesn't build love. It builds resentment, and resentment is quiet, but it's poison. You deserve gratitude. You deserve a thank you. You deserve to feel valued, not just for what you do, but for who you are. If your help goes unnoticed, if your advice is always ignored, if your presence is taken for granted, it's okay to step back. It doesn't mean you love them less. It means you love yourself more. Say, I'd love to help, but only if I feel respected in the process. Say, I can't give like I used to, but I'd still love to connect. Say, I need you to show up for me the way I've always shown up for you. Because here's the truth. Your love doesn't have to come at the expense of your dignity. They can coexist, and when they do, the relationship deepens, it matures, it becomes healthier for you and for them. You're not here to be walked on. You're not here to be forgotten until needed. You are not a footnote in their busy lives. You are still the mother. You are still the father. And you are still a person rich in experience, full of stories, worthy of kindness, of time, of respect. So live that truth, not by shouting it, not by begging for it, but by being it. In every quiet choice, every clear word, every moment you stand tall in who you are. And the most beautiful part is, the more you live this way, the more you teach them, without even trying, how to love you right. There's a moment, usually quiet, often alone, when you begin to realize something needs to change. It might happen while you're sitting at the kitchen table, looking at a calendar that no longer includes you. It might come in the form of a conversation where you feel small, dismissed, or simply not heard. And that's when the question finally rises to the surface, not in anger, not in despair, but in truth. Where am I still giving my power away? It's a question that can sting, because the honest answer often points back To years of putting others first, of saying yes when you wanted to say no, of biting your tongue just to keep the peace. But here's the beauty: once you ask that question, you've already begun the process of healing, because awareness is the first door to change, and what comes next isn't some grand confrontation, or a dramatic speech, or an overnight transformation. It's much gentler than that, much more powerful too. It starts with a simple word no, but not the kind of no that's laced with bitterness or fury. This no is quiet, calm, rooted in self-respect. It's the no that says I matter, the no that says I've given enough today, the no that says I need to rest. And that's okay. It might sound like, I can't babysit this weekend, I have other plans, or I'm not comfortable with that decision, or even just, no thank you. You don't have to explain yourself endlessly. You don't have to apologize for honoring your own boundary. Saying no is not a rejection of your love, it's a return to your balance. And once you allow yourself to say no, you create space for something far more meaningful. Saying yes to yourself. For years, maybe even decades, your calendar was filled with the needs of other appointments, errands, family events, favors, support, all important, all given with love. But now the invitation is different. It's time to ask yourself, what would I do, just for me? Maybe it's booking that trip you always dreamed about alone, or with a friend. Maybe it's joining a dance class, not to impress anyone, not to perform, but simply to move your body and feel joy again. Maybe it's returning to reading, or painting, or gardening, or walking through the park with no schedule, no agenda, no one to please but yourself. You're allowed to live for you now, not in a selfish way, but in a soulful way. You are not abandoning your family. You're reminding yourself that your life still matters, that your time still holds value, that your joy is not a luxury, it's a right. And here's where the magic starts to happen. When you begin doing things that light you up from the inside, people notice. Your energy changes. You speak differently. You carry yourself with more peace, more depth. Your children, even if they don't say it out loud, begin to see you not just as mom or dad, but as a whole person. Someone with a life, someone with choices, someone who still shines. That shift, as small as it seems, changes everything. And when moments of disrespect arise, as they sometimes do, you'll find yourself handling them differently, not with fire, not with tears, but with strength. It might sound like, I won't be spoken to that way. Simple, steady, direct. You don't raise your voice. You don't need to, because that sentence carries something heavier than anger. It carries self-worth. When you say those words, not with spite, but with calm certainty, it tells your children, and anyone else around you, that you're no longer willing to be invisible. You're no longer tolerating behavior that chips away at your peace. And what you'll find is, the more you speak like that, the more people start to listen, because respect doesn't respond to volume, it responds to clarity. Another gentle, powerful practice is to check in with yourself, honestly, regularly. Ask the quiet question, do I feel heard in this relationship? Am I giving too much of myself without being refilled? Am I doing this out of love, or out of fear that if I don't, I'll lose their affection? These questions are not accusations, they are mirrors. And in those reflections, you might see where your love has turned into people-pleasing, where your kindness has become silence, where your giving has started to cost you your own joy. But once you see it, you can change it, not all at once, not with pressure, but with small, consistent shift. You say no when it feels right. You say yes to things that bring you peace. You speak your truth when something hurts. You take up space without guilt. And the more you live this way, the less you'll find yourself walking on eggshells, waiting for appreciation, or replaying hurtful conversations in your head. You'll start to feel lighter, more grounded, more like yourself again. And here's the quiet gift hidden inside all this work. Your children begin to change too, not because you forced them, not because you demanded anything, but because you modeled something they hadn't seen in a while. Your wholeness, your clarity, your dignity. They start calling more, not because you asked, but because they want to. They start listening more, not because they feel guilty, but because your words carry calm weight. Now, they begin to see you, really see you, for the first time in a long time. And that's what this is really about. Not control, not revenge, not teaching anyone a lesson, but becoming whole again. For your own sake, you're allowed to grow. Even now, you're allowed to change the story. Even now, you're allowed to come back to yourself, at any age, in any season, without needing anyone's permission. So ask yourself, with love, with honesty, with compassion, where am I still giving my power away? And then step by step, take it back. Kindly, gently, boldly. You've always had it in you.
6. The final message. Rediscovering yourself. It's never too late. You are not just a parent. You are a person. Those words may feel small at first, maybe even strange, because for so long your identity has been built around the people you raised, the lives you shaped, the family you held together through storms and celebration. You've been the one they called when things fell apart, the one who knew where everything was, how everyone felt, what everyone needed. You gave your time, your energy, your heart, and you did it all with love. But somewhere in that journey, it's possible that a piece of you got left behind. You became mom. You became dad. You became grandma, grandpa, the steady one, the dependable one, the one who made holidays happen, who knew the family recipe, who picked up the phone even when you were tired. And now, as the pace slows, as the house grows quiet, as the phone rings less than it used to, you find yourself asking quietly, is this it? And the answer with every fiber of your being is no. This is not the end. This is not a waiting room. This is not the closing chapter. This is your second beginning. You are not here just to sit by the window and watch the world move on without you. You are not meant to live only in the past, through memories, through photos, through stories that begin with I remember when. You are still here, still breathing, still capable of joy, of adventure, of learning, of laughter, of love, because you are still becoming. This part of your life, this space after the busy years, after the parenting hustle, after the noise, this is sacred ground. This is where you get to meet yourself again. Not the version of you defined by diapers, carpool lines, late-night homework help, or silent sacrifices, but the version of you that existed before all that, the one who loved to paint, or dance, or travel, or write, the one who dreamed, who wondered, who wanted to feel alive. It's not too late. You are not too old to begin again. Not too old to find a new hobby. Not too old to fall in love with someone. With a place. With a part of yourself you thought had long since faded. Not too old to make new friends. To have new conversations. To tell new stories. Not too old to say, this is who I am now. Not just a parent. Not just a title, but a full, breathing, vibrant human being. And when you start living like that, when you wake up and choose joy, when you start saying yes to your own life, when you stop apologizing for taking up space, your children will notice. They will see it in your posture, in your energy, in your eyes. They will see and it will move them, because there's nothing more powerful than a parent who lives with dignity, not the kind of dignity that demands respect, but the kind that flows quietly, confidently, from within, the kind that says, I know who I am. The kind that doesn't chase approval. There is something magnetic about a person who is at peace with themselves, who no longer needs to prove anything, who no longer carries guilt or regret like a badge, but who walks forward slowly, deliberately, gracefully, into the life they still get to live. That's what dignity looks like. And when you pair that with calm, with clarity, with a quiet understanding of your worth, everything around you begins to shift. Not because the world changes, but because you do. Your presence begins to carry weight again. Not because you insist on it, but because you've reclaimed it. Your children stop seeing you as someone they need to manage, or fix, or keep busy. They begin to see you as someone they admire, as someone with depth, with courage, with wisdom, not just from age, but from introspection, from healing, from rising again when it would have been easier to fade into the background. And slowly, sometimes quietly, They will come closer, not out of obligation but out of all, because you are teaching them something powerful, that the story of a person doesn't end when the kids grow up, when the career ends, when the home grows still. The story continues, the spirit grows, the soul expands, and the more you live that truth, the more permission you give them to live their own lives with that same kind of fullness. So no, you are not just a parent. You are not just the helper, the caretaker, the one who fills in the cracks. You are not just support. You are still becoming. And even if no one has said it to you in a long time, maybe not your children, maybe not your friends, hear it now and let it settle deep into your bones. You matter. You are enough. You are still in the middle of your becoming. Let your days be filled, not with waiting but with choosing. Let your hours be shaped, not by what's missing but by what's possible. Let your life reflect, not just your past, but your future, because it's still yours, and because you've earned the right, not just to be respected but to be joyful, to be free, to be fully unapologetically yourself. Now go, not because you're running from anything, but because you're walking towards something beautiful. You're